So we're in week 14, and we have finally made it to chapter 7. So 3 chapters, we've been here for 14 weeks, so yeah, we're taking it nice and slow because, like, it's important. It's important to drill down on things that really have the power to change our life. Like the power to way that you interact with things in your life every day. This sermon has the power to do that. And what we come to today, I was trying to think about it, and like we're gonna start with like 3 scenarios real quick to kind of see what Jesus is doing. And I think some of them you'll find pretty familiar. Like the first is like, if you've been online much, or even in the news media, you read newspapers, you read news online, right? Anytime somebody that gets more looks than any of us probably, they're more popular, more famous, right? Anytime they make an offensive comment, what happens? It's called cancel culture now, right? All of a sudden, it's like the wind out of your sails. Like they don't pay attention to you anymore. Like you may even see it in your school. It may have somebody says something in your workplace. Somebody says something, and all of a sudden, all respect gone. Nobody lost it, and people actually turn and start judging them, right? Why would you do that? Like you just kind of hear it go off in your head. Maybe you got caught in that sometime, but the reality is like the people. Then you look at some people. Maybe you're looking from the outside. And you're looking and you're like, you did the same thing last week, last year, last month. Or maybe if you're a reader, right? The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne, right? Puritan New England, Hester Prynne, right? Is publicly shamed for adultery, right? And forced to wear a scarlet A. Meanwhile, her lover, a respected Reverend Dimsdale, hides his involvement, even judges Hester publicly, but is suffering from internal guilt. He doesn't get the hit, but she does. And he's like, but you were doing the same thing. Or maybe it's like for me, sometimes like we talk to people about something as simple as being late. And what we do in that moment is we go, there's no good reason that you were late. We automatically assume that you're lazy or you just blah, 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 blah. And I can get caught up in that sometimes. I'm human, right? And sometimes I'm late. If you've ever been here on a Sunday morning, I show up late sometimes. And it's easy to say, well, you got kids, you got da, 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 da. But the reality is, I didn't get kids last night. At least not yet. One day I'll be able to say, yes, a kid came last night. But like I didn't get kids last night. It was just poor planning. Like emergencies happen, but there's not an emergency every week. That doesn't happen, right? It seems like there is sometimes, but here's the thing. We all make those judgment calls. You can probably find yourself in there where we all make these things where if we were to look back at our life, we didn't always hold to that standard. And I think what we see here is that Jesus is going to continue to address the hypocrisy he did for all of chapter 6. Don't be like them, remember? Don't be like them. And he's going to do that with his people specifically. Right? So what we're going to cling to today, the main truth that I want you to hold on to is it may be kind of humorous at first, but I think it's going to capture it for us is that don't be a judgmental jerk, but do judge from a place of grace. Don't be a judgmental jerk. Like I could probably stop right there and we could just keep going with it. But you are going to see a thing where Jesus is like, no, but you do judge from a place of grace. So the first point we need to get to is being judgmental is never okay. Let's just park it there for a second. Verse 1 and 2 says it like this. Do not judge. Last time I checked, do not means don't do it. And in this sense, it actually means don't do it, as in they're already doing it, and then keep not doing it. So cease and desist kind of language. But as we talked about, as we were reading the scripture, there's this part in there where Jesus calls somebody a hypocrite. And then he actually called somebody dogs and pigs. So Jesus seems to be making some judgment calls on his own. So we need to figure out, okay, you said don't judge, but then you're going to judge a few verses later. So what do you mean? What do you mean? So stop it and keep stopping it. So judgmental, so it says, for you will be judged by the same standard which you judge others. You see judge popping up over and over. And you will be measured by the same measure which you use. It's literally you'll be measured by the measure by the measure. Standard by standard by standard. Like, so there's these things we need to get straight before we go any further. Right? And judgmental for us, right? Judgmental for us, Micah, is a few slides ahead, it's going to say it. It says judgmental is we're really talking about hypocritical judgment. And I'm going to assume that everybody knows what a hypocrite is at this point. We've talked about it several times over the week. Play actor, say one thing, do another. I thought about it this morning. I was like, I don't know if you heard it growing up or not, but somebody ever said, do as I say, not as I. That's a hypocrite. We say it in jest. Parents, we can get caught in that. Do as I say, not as I do. But in reality, our kids are watching us. So if we tell them to do something, they should already see it reflected in our life. They have to. Because they're not going to just do what I say. They're actually going to do what I do. And you've seen that. For good or for better or worse, right? You've seen that pop up. So it's this hypocritical judgment. It's this word judge is the idea of taking up the seat as arbiter of righteousness. Yet not wanting, right? Not wanting to be judged the way that you were judging somebody else. Not judging the way you judge somebody else. Like you think, like if you're like me, sometimes you might jump to Romans 2. Where Jesus is like going in on like the Gentile portion of the Roman church. He's like, they do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And you can kind of see the Jewish people in the background going, yeah, yeah. And then he turns. But you do the same thing. So he puts us all on a level playing field. Because you, the judge, he says, do the same thing. Even though you have the law. Even though you know better. James 4 says it like this. He says, talking to the church, right? Because Jesus says, your brother a couple times in the next few verses. So he's talking not about the people on the outside. He's talking about the people within the four walls of the church. Who would call Jesus Lord, the family for our sake, right? Brother and sister are family to Matthew as he's writing. He says, don't criticize one another, brothers and sisters. Anyone who defames or judges a fellow believer, you see that word defame, that's going to help us define what he means by judge. Who defames and judges a fellow believer, defames and judges the law. If you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. We all seek to elevate ourselves into the place of judge. But that seat is reserved for God alone. Because we judge based off of these external things a lot of times before we ever get in close to see what's really going on. That's the kind of judgment that Jesus is talking about when he says, do not judge. Do not judge like you know every little detail of this person's life as to why they're in this place that they're in, based off of what you see alone. That's not who you're called to be as a follower of Jesus. It's not. Then we get this word standard. It's like a beacon. It's like, it's this one thing, right? It's this standard, this beacon, this measure. So I brought this. Morgan goes, yeah, you can tell you were building a fence this week because you got all these things out here that you would use to build a fence. Like if I'm going to measure something, and I say it's, let's go a little bit easier. It's 6 inches. Lock it. 6 inches. If I tell you it's 6 inches long, I don't expect to come back and see something that's this long. But that's 6 inches to me. No. 6 inches is 6 inches. Is 6 inches. You go to Europe, you might have to go to centimeters, but in America, it's 6 inches. Right? So I expect to be measured. The measure is the same, and the only measure that doesn't change with culture or anything else is what God has said and how God has designed his creation to live. That was the purpose of the law. The law was, this is what it looks like to flourish. But really what it did was it called out how wicked our hearts were because we could never live up to the standard. We could never do that. Only Jesus ever came and measured 6 inches. He was the only one to perfectly execute everything about this life. And that then it becomes the standard by which we are measured. And it's not to beat us over the head, right? It's not his perfection that we're trying to work ourselves into. No, his perfection was accredited to us by faith. That's how we meet the measure. And what Jesus is saying, and he's already said it in Matthew 4 where he says, the measure you use will be measured to you. He's already said it before he gets here. So it's not okay to measure in these ways. And I'm going to help us out here. I'm going to move quickly. Just some ways for recognizing hypocrisy in our life. I actually gave it a search because I'm not that smart. So I needed some help. And this is the ways. Maybe you find yourself here like I do. Moral licensing. After doing something we consider good, we feel entitled to act in ways that are against our stated values. We did this good, so I can act like this. Maybe that's not you. Cognitive dissonance reduction. I was like, come on, give me easy words. But then it made sense. So when people act in ways that conflict with their self-image, right, they experience this. So I do something I know is wrong, and it's what we would call our conscience. It's like, that's not who you say you are, right? So we feel this discomfort, and to resolve this, we actually rationalize or make up excuses, right, as to why our actions are exceptions to the rule, but we condemn others for that same behavior. Maybe it's attribution bias. People tend to attribute their own negative actions to external circumstances. It happened to me. It made me do it, right? But see other similar actions as a reflection of their character. No, that's just who you are. It happened to us, but no, you are your sin. Social and group pressures. Individuals join in collective judgment to fit in with a group, right? We have never done that before, even if they privately engage in the same behavior. Oh, you're condemning this, but I'm doing this over here. The church has a pretty big problem with this. We condemn homosexuality very vocally. But when we talk about heterosexual sin, it's more of a hush-hush. Hey, we have to be even-handed. God has plenty to say about unjust balances. He has plenty to say about favoritism. And we can have that discussion, but we're going to get persecution for holding up the standard as what it is. But the standard has to be the same. We can't change just because I'm friends with you, just because it's easier to do that. No, we hold the line because Jesus held the line first. And that's what we're called to do. Selective memory, I liked this one. We could probably call it selective hearing at times. People often remember their own intentions and mitigating circumstances, but focus only on the outcomes of others' actions. I only look at what happened. I don't even care about your motives or anything like that. Self-serving justifications. Individuals may believe their own motives are pure or the circumstances unique, making their actions justifiable, while others' actions, they're inexcusable. Nope. We don't do that at all either. I had to do it. You had a choice. Moral superiority. Judging others can make people feel morally superior, boosting their self-esteem and protecting their ego from self-criticism. So rather than feel bad about myself, I'm going to make you feel bad about yourself. And then cultural, this isn't an exhaustive list, but culture and social norms. In some cultures or communities, certain forms of judgment are normalized, making it easier for individuals to justify their own hypocrisy, as it's just the way things are. That's kind of that catch-all category. Yeah, it's just how it is today. Rather than entering uncomfortable conversations with people we call family and say, hey, I see this in your life, and maybe you've been there before, which makes it even more clear, and going, I love you too much to leave you there because I know what's ahead. I know what's going to happen if you keep walking down this path. So you see, I'm sure we all found ourselves somewhere in there at some point, either now or in our life. Nobody's perfect. I know you can think of a time where, man, you might have done that. And that's the thing, is like, that's why Jesus comes on the front end and is like, stop it. Stop it. The issue here is not the action of calling a wrong wrong. That's not what Jesus is talking about. The issue of do not judge is when we call out their wrong when we are doing the same thing or worse in our own lives. And that's why Jesus takes us to the root. He takes us to the heart. Because being judgmental, our second point, being judgmental ultimately comes from the heart. In the next few verses, he's gonna, that's kind of the underlying motive, right? Is because he starts out with what? Why? Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye? Why? Why do you do it? Simon Sinek has a great book. It's not a Christian book, but I suggest it because it talks about the power of starting with your why. Because what you do from your why really drives everything you do. You have to get your why right. The vision for your life is your why. And if our vision is set by God, that means our whys will find their roots in Him. And then no matter what the circumstances are out of that, we'll be able to walk and talk and act as He did. Why? Motive matters. At the heart of being judgmental is an insensitivity, right, to our own need for God's grace every second of every day. That's what I see. That's what I see in this. Is like it's at the heart of being judgmental, as we've defined it. That hypocritical judgment is an insensitivity to our own need for God's grace every second. Go back to those verses real quick, Micah, because we see why. So we see motive matters. Then we see this idea of look, right? And I want you to underline look, but then I want you to go down a couple words later and underline notice. Look as in, I think I see it, right? Notice as in, I'm intimately acquainted with it. I've actually deeply thought about what's going on. And Jesus, I bet I left that in the car. Psh, look at that. I didn't grab the biggest thing, but that's okay because we have a little left over here. Because then he puts it with this thing. I dropped it. It's so small. Okay. He says, look at that. You look at the splinter. And some versions say speck, right? Can you see that? On the tip of my finger. That's a piece of sawdust left over from this week. He says, you think you see that. But you're missing this. Somehow, you're not able to notice the sticking out of your eye. but you can see the speck of sawdust on the end of my finger. And then to get it better, he goes on to say, but you're trying to take the sawdust out of my eye with this big old thing swinging around like this. And I don't know if you've ever tried to take something out of somebody's eye. When I worked as an athletic trainer, I had to do this. I had to take a Q-tip. I had to flip their eyelid over to wipe it out. So it means I got to get in close. So now if I was over top of you, trying to get something out of your eye, with this swinging around, what's going to happen? At best, I'm going to hit you with my log. At worst, I'm going to damage your eye. Ashby had my other stick that was about 4 foot long, that we would, literally, you're going to take somebody out. And what Jesus is saying, right, is we perceive the hearts of others from our view of their lives without getting close. I think I see that in you. But we never really stop on a regular basis to examine the sins in our own life. And no matter where we're at in our walk with God, there are always logs to deal with. And this is a piece of an 8-foot log. And what I know about this from having built a fence is that on the other end of the rest of this is concrete. And it's 3 feet in the ground. So you can imagine how stubborn it's going to be to get out. I'm probably going to need some help. Because that's pretty heavy. So when Jesus is sitting here going, don't judge like this because you're swinging a log around, knocking people out as you say you're trying to help them take this little speck out of their eye. And if you've ever had something in front of your eye for any reason, it also affects your perception of what's going on. It also affects how your depth perception is off, your balance is off, and you're trying to do surgery on something in somebody else's life. And the reality of Jesus is first deal with the beam of wood in your own eye. And then you will see clearly to take the splinter out. It's not saying don't ever enter into the struggle. We'll talk about that in a second. But you have to be constantly engaging with the sin that is in your own life. An ongoing confession and repentance of the sin in our lives reminds us of an ongoing need of grace. If you don't sit with your own sin, confess it to God, no matter how big it is. It can be what you perceive to be a speck, or it could be a log that's 8 foot long, rooted in concrete deep in the ground of your heart. You have to get close to it and inspect the why. And as you do that, the showers of grace will wash over you if your faith is in Jesus. Because he paid for that and he doesn't want to leave you there. And Jesus is calling his followers, his family, to not just be about that in their own lives, but that's the place from which we engage in the lives of others. One of the best stories in the Bible to even talk about this is 2 Samuel 12. 2 Samuel 12, David, right? We know David, King David, he was awesome, man after God's own heart, but what did he do? He had a pretty messed up past, right? And he had slept with Uriah's wife, got her pregnant, and then sent him to the front, told the troops to back off. He got killed. Uriah got killed. David's like, I'm safe. Judgment, taking care, I'm good. Prophet. Nathan comes up and he says this. He says, "So the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he arrived, he said to him, 'There were two men in a certain city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large flocks and herd, but the poor man had nothing except one small ewe lamb that he had bought. He raised her, grew her up with him and with his children. From his meager food, she would eat, in his cup she would drink, in his arms he would sleep. She was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man could not bring himself to take one of his own sheep. He had a bunch of sheep. I can't take one of them. I'm going to take yours.' Instead, he took the poor man's and prepared it for his guests. David was furious with the man, the rich man, and said to Nathan, 'As the Lord lives, that man who did this deserves to die.'" There's the judgment. If he acted like this, he deserves to die. "Because he has done this thing and shown no pity, he must pay 4 lambs. Not only should you die, but you should pay 4 times the price." We don't ever say that about people who go against the things that we love, or they hurt others, but do we ever look at our own? And Nathan replied, "David, you are that man." This is what the Lord God of Israel says: "I anointed you king over Israel and rescued you from Saul. I gave you the master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that was not enough, I would have given you even more. Why then have you despised the Lord's command by doing what I consider evil? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword and took his wife as your own. You murdered him with an Ammonite sword." That measure came back. But here's the response. David responded to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Then Nathan replied, "And the Lord has taken away your sin, and you will not die." There were consequences on earth for David, but hear that, and that's the verdict that God puts over your life in Jesus. "I have taken away your sin. You will not die." And we have to be, in an ongoing way, drawing close to that and being reminded of that, because that's how we're going to move out. That's how we're going to be able to judge rightly and judge wisely. Because if I'm going to throw some scripture up here, and these are just a few in the New Testament. Like, there's a bunch more we could go to. But Matthew 7, the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Church discipline: go to your brother, then take somebody with you, then take the whole church in leadership. And then if by that point you haven't got to the root of the problem, they won't acknowledge what's going on. You've got all the then we're going to say, we're going to have to put some boundaries up. Galatians 1:2, 6:1-2, bear this burden with your brother. Don't just point it out and say, all right, go figure it out. Ephesians 4, speak the truth in love, not judgment. All of these are happening within the community of believers. It's not this distance that says you're lobbing bombs. It's actually, I'm willing to come in close. I'm willing to help you walk. I've been there before, so let me link arms. Man to man, woman to woman. Let's get this right for the sake of the kingdom. We wisely, discerningly call right, and wrong, wrong. And we're going to see, Jesus is going to point to this honestly in this pretty hard part to decipher at times. We're in the kingdom of God, being able to judge rightly is a necessity. Probably more now than ever before. And it's going to increasingly, the ability to say what is right and what is wrong, we're going to need to understand that. So, and we see that as we get into the last part, into verse 6, where it says that don't give what is holy, holy, set apart, don't give what is holy and set apart, right, to dogs, or toss your pearls. Holy and pearls, let's put those together, right? Something of value, something like the gospel and the kingdom in our life. These things we're not giving to, well, God, who are you talking about when you're calling somebody a dog? Because it comes up multiple times in the Bible where he calls, sometimes it's the people who weren't of the nation of Israel, right? The Samaritan woman. But, as I got to think about it, even she goes, but the dogs eat the crumbs from the master's table. In Psalms 22, I think I was reading, like it's a prayer that's associated with Jesus, but it's like the dogs are nailing him to the cross. So there's, to me, there's this sense of two different groups of people that Jesus is addressing here when we're looking at dogs and pigs, right? There were dogs in this time where it's a wild dog, right? Wild dogs on the street. And these are the ones where we hear our adage, right? You feed it and turns around and bites the hand of the one that fed it. Man, you could feed these dogs, but they don't have no loyalty to you. Psh. Take that food and then take your hand with it. You are edible. The pig, you ever bit something and something was in there that you didn't expect to be in there, and like it might have broke your tooth, or like it was really hard, like a bone was left in the pork chop or something. And you're like, and you spit it out. Pig bites that pearl. It's not only going to spit it out of its little trough, it's going to stomp on it, bury it, right? And it's easy to see how, man, if we handed the gospel to a hostile person, somebody who's hostile to the gospel, hostile to the ways of Christ, hostile, and we assume that's a lot of people. Where Jesus is giving a word of caution about how we give those things out, because they'll tear it to pieces. That makes sense to us, right? But he also can't mean don't spare the gospel. Don't share the gospel out. Don't live the gospel. Don't share it with those who need it. Like, I got to thinking about this a little bit more this week, and I was like, man, he can't just mean don't share with people that are dangerous, or don't share with those people that are really like against us. Because in my evangelism class, one of the things they told us is that's only 10% of the conversations you could have. 1 out of 10 will be hostile to the gospel. So that leaves 90% of the conversations that we have something to do. A lot of times we probably feel like it's a 50-50 shot, let's be honest, when we're sharing the gospel. I feel like everybody's coming from a throat. But in reality, 9 out of 10 are open to it. So when I was reading this, I was like, so there are also domesticated dogs? I got a dog in my house, Millie. And you know what? I'm responsible for feeding her. I'm responsible for feeding her the things that she should eat. I'm responsible for feeding her things she shouldn't eat. Or not feeding her the things she shouldn't eat. Sorry. There is a stewardship of the gospel, kingdom, and resources that God has given me to those things that are in my care in the kingdom. Like, I'm not going to give Ashby deep theological truths. He gets milk. He gets basic things that he can understand. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Let's just start there. And then as the question, well, what does it mean to love? All right, let's talk about what it means to love. Like, I'm responsible to understand where he's at and how to give it. And I believe that is the call on each believer's life. You're not going to throw out hard things for people to understand when they haven't even grasped the gospel yet. Because it's not going to make sense, and they're going to just whatever. Or they may even just turn completely away because, oh, you're just talking crazy talk. Like, there's this valuable pearl that you in your life have dug up and said, I'm all in on this pearl. And what you have to be willing to do is wisely discern where people are at in your life. And how do I enter into this moment with them in a way that I can steward their next step towards Jesus? How can I feed them milk? How can I feed them baby food? How can I feed them like toddler food? How can I feed them like whole foods? How can I feed them gourmet meals? How can I feed them in this season in a way that's appropriate? Because we have a responsibility to steward wisely the gospel and life God has given us. We have to. We're not to be judgmental jerks, being hypocrites, but we are to judge from a place of grace. And that's our call this week.